Hey there, folks. Welcome back to Photoshop. And what we're doing right now is we're going to set up some preferences for how we want Photoshop to look um, and behave for us as we work. I'm a huge fan of using shortcuts. I use them as much as possible, mainly for saving time, um, but also it just lets you work. It actually makes it easier to work if you have one hand on your mouse and one hand on your keyboard to do these different operations and commands. And our very first shortcut is going to be for preferences, and it's actually one of the trickier shortcuts, or one of the shortcuts that doesn't really make sense. And the shortcut for preferences is Command on a Mac, Control on a PC, Command K or Control K. So I press that, and let me make sure I'm in Photoshop, and there we are. Man, it comes up with preferences here. One of the things, I usually leave this just in its default settings. I always make sure beep when done is not checked. I don't need a pat on the back every time I'm done doing an operation here. So I keep these pretty much just how they are right here. In terms of the color theme, I usually stay on this kind of second darkest one. The black is just too black. The white is a little too blinding. This gray really isn't gray enough for me, but this kind of darker gray works perfectly. I usually try working in a slightly darker room. So I just don't want anything, any colors, interfering with the editing that I'm doing here in Photoshop. I keep all of these just how they are. For workspace, I'm happy with that. For tools, I'm good with this. If you like that kind of middle mouse button scrolling wheel, you can click zoom with scroll wheel here. This is one selection here that I always turn off. Use shift key for tool switch. When we're working with tools, a shortcut for them is just a letter, just a single letter, no command, no alt option, just one letter. Now with tools, there are often tools nested inside of each other, and I'll show you what I mean. Actually, I'll show you right now what I mean. So I'm gonna cancel out of this. I'm gonna create a new Photoshop file. And here on the left-hand side of the screen, I see my tools panel. You can also see there's an arrow here or a triangle. So that's telling me there are multiple tools underneath that brush. So I can hit B, just the single letter, and that will go through these other three brushes nested inside of the brush tool. Now, if I go back to Command K to tools, if I click on use shift key for tool switch, that means I've got to hold down the shift key while I'm pressing B to go through all of those brushes. And just for the life of me, I can't really figure out why you would want to do that, but I always make sure that is turned off. Now for the rest of these, I'm good. History log, I'm not too concerned with. File handling, I'm good here. Export, I don't need to worry about that. Performance, I cannot remember what the default for history states is. I think it used to be 20 or 25, maybe it's 50 now, but I usually bump that up to 100. What that means is that I can do 100 operations, 100 keystrokes, and go back in time 100 of those. Just doing a Command Z for undo. I can undo 100 operations. If you're doing anything more than 100, then you probably just need to start over again. But because it's every time you click your mouse, that's a history state, those can go by very quickly when we're working with the brush tool. So 100, 100 is a good safety net for you. Now, what we're going to learn is that in Photoshop, there are multiple ways to do everything. Not always, one way isn't always better than any other, but you do have options. So if I want to change this history states number, I can just click on it and type in 50 or 500 or 100. That's one way of changing those history states. A second way is just using that little drop down arrow and moving this little slider. Then a third way, which is probably my favorite, is using a scrubby slider. So what a scrubby slider is we see my arrow, my cursor, and as soon as I hover over history states, we see a little hand and then two triangles on either side. So if I hover over this, click my left mouse button and hold it down, and then just drag left or right, that's the third way you can change that. So 100 is what I prefer. Cursors, I usually make sure it's normal brush tip and show crosshair. In the past, standard was the default, but I prefer precise for other cursors. The reasoning behind that is that if I'm trying to make a very specific selection, or in this case, it's an eyedropper, so I'm trying to select a certain color, I can't really tell where my cursor is if it has this icon. Whereas with precise, I know that my target color, the color I'll be selecting, is going to be the one in the middle of that bullseye or crosshair. So precise. Transparency, I leave it at that color. Units and rulers, inches and points are perfectly good. For new document preset resolutions, make life easy on yourself. And for print, we're always going to keep this at 300 pixels per inch. For screen, it'll always be 72. And we'll get into resolution later. For guides, guides are these handy little reference lines that can help with layout or composition. We see them on the screen, but you will not see them when you print your work. So that's why they kind of have these really bright colors here, magenta and cyan or light blue, something to stand out. But let's say you're working on a project where the colors are predominantly light blue or magenta. You can just come into preferences, change by clicking on the little color swatch, and then selecting a different color. So that's for guides. For plugins, I'm not too concerned. Type, I'm not concerned. .3D, we may or may not get into. It taxes my computer, and I've got quite a bit of RAM, and it still causes it to overheat, and it just takes an incredibly long time to render. So if you guys are working on older laptops, 3D probably will not be covered this summer. Enhanced controls, I'm on a iMac, so I don't have the touch bar. Technology previews, keep that. And then this is letting Adobe learn from you if you want them to. So I can just click OK, and the next time I open Photoshop, those changes will have taken effect. But that's preferences. Once again, preferences, the shortcut is either Command or Control and the letter K. So hold down Command and then press K, and that will bring up preferences for you. Thank you.